There is no doubt that the only continent remaining for the entire whole world is Africa. That is why we believe as human capital that Africa indeed is the future of the world. And in case you have just joined us on this platform, this is the Religion and Enterprise Television, where we discuss issues to do with faith-based institutions and the role they can play in making sure that SMEs are built, developed, so they can become mega brands in the world. And today we happen to be in the home of Africa, the African Union Commission, where all the big policies for the continent are formulated and implemented by member states of the continent. And so therefore, we are going to have a conversation with the Commissioner in charge of Economic Development, Trade, Industry, Tourism, and Minerals, His Excellency Albert Muchanga, and we're going to be exploring the future of the Continental Free Trade Area. And one most important subject that we're going to be talking about is to do with youth and women and the African Union passport. Is it a mirage or a reality? Come with me as we go to His Excellency Albert Muchanga's office to have this conversation. Let me welcome you once again to the Religion and Enterprise Television. And today we are so highly privileged to be in the House of Africa. We call it the House of Africa, the African Union Commission, and precisely in the office of the Commissioner for Economic Development, Trade, Industry, and Minerals. And I'm talking about His Excellency Albert Muchanga, the Commissioner of this department. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador Albert Muchanga is African Union Commissioner for Economic Development, Trade, Tourism, Industry, and Minerals. In addition to these broad areas, the portfolio also covers investment, innovation, entrepreneurship, economic integration, economic policies, and research, statistics, and oil and gas. He is formerly Commissioner for Trade and Industry. In this position, ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador has provided strategic leadership in facilitating negotiation, conclusion, and ratification of the agreement establishing the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which entered into force on the 30th of May 2019, and whose start of trading was launched on 1st January 2021. In addition, Ambassador Muchanga provided similar leadership on matters of trade, industrialization, mining, and customs cooperation. He mobilized the African private sector to play a critical role in the AfCFTA, culminating in the establishment of the African Business Council, Pan-African Manufacturers Association, an association of chambers of mines and other mining associations in Africa. His Excellency Ambassador Muchanga previously worked in the Zambian civil service at home and abroad, including as Permanent Secretary, Ambassador of Zambia to Brazil, Ambassador of Zambia to Ethiopia, and Permanent Representative to the African Union and United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, and as a Deputy Executive Secretary of the Southern African Development Community, SADC. Ambassador Albert Muchanga works with ease as technical, professional, management, leadership, and political levels. Your Excellency, what an honor to be with you.
It's my pleasure.
I am so excited to have this opportunity to have a chat with you
And
on
you're
matters
most
to
welcome.
do with economic development, trade, industry, particularly with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area.
Yes, please.
So even though we have mentioned a little bit about yourself, would you mind telling us a little bit, in summary, how the journey has been so far?
Well, the journey has been interesting. When I completed my undergraduate studies, I made a deliberate decision to go into public service. Some of my colleagues went into the private sector, but I decided that my calling was to go into the public service. And it's a decision that I've never regretted. I'm very, very happy and very much at ease when I'm at the service of the public. And so it is something which is really fulfilling, yes, and uplifting. And in all this, one gets to do his work if you have got a supportive wife and if the children are happy. So my wife and I have been able to bring up 3 young girls. Now they are ladies, and they're also starting their own families. And she has always been supportive. So when you've got a family behind you, you can do quite a lot. Yes.
I mean, this is exciting. I mean, the short remarks that you've made brings out very interesting values. Number one, you use the word calling.
Yes.
Which means that you didn't just go into this as deliberate, but you saw it as a divine assignment for what God wants you to be. You talk about the family and the fact that you couldn't have done this alone, but because you have a supporting wife, which goes to underscore the essence of the family concept. And then again, the support of the children, which is interesting. And let me congratulate you for that.
Thank you.
Your Excellency, this is the African Union Commission.
Yes.
Which you head the economic development, trade, industry, tourism, and minerals.
Yes, please.
Now, this program is for the entire continent of Africa. And as you know, African Union Commission is emanating from the original Organization of African Unity.
Yes.
What we want you to help us, for the majority of young people in Africa, what is the difference between OAU and the African Union Commission? What has really changed in terms of both structures, systems, and if you like, the whole corporate, identity of the two?
When our countries got independent, the first realization was that we needed to get together as Africa. Right. And hence the spirit of Pan-Africanism, and hence the idea to come up with a continental institution to promote African unity. And hence, the Organization of African Unity was brought into existence.
Right.
And at that time, quite a number of our countries were still under colonial rule. So there was a strong commitment in the purposes of the Organization of African Unity to facilitate the decolonization process throughout the continent. Then when the OAU was being formed, although it did not enter into the documents, a lot of visionary statements were made by the leaders that at some stage we needed to create an African common market. Right. And hence the spirit now to come up with the Constitutive Act of the African Union, which focuses more on a deeper economic, political, and social integration across Africa, and which also commits Africa to pursue goals focused on democratization of African society. Right. So we are moving from an organization to an intergovernmental organization that is focused on decolonization and trying to bring us closer through united action to an organization now that is more focused on a deeper economic integration. If you look at the objectives and the purposes of the OAU, the purposes were very, 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 very limited, about 7 of them. Right. I have them here. Right. Actually, 5 of them, the purposes under Article 2 of the OAU Charter. Right. Now, when you come to the Constitutive Act of the African Union, right, you've got objectives, right, and there are about 14 of them, 14. Which means expanded focus. And one of the key issues there is to bring the African people closer to the African Union so that they should also participate in the affairs of the African Union. So we are moving from general unit to closer cooperation and integration.
And so from where you sit, and I'm happy that you are in charge of the driving seat of majority of these things, the question I'm asking is, from the time we moved from OAU to African Union Commission, based on the 14 objectives or so that you have enumerated, if you were to assess it over the years now, are we making progress? And if we are making progress, are you really confident about the fact that we are on track in achieving the objectives that we have enumerated under the Commission?
I think one of the key achievements we have really garnered as Africa is that we started a process of commitment to multilateralism. Right. And that has lived on. Good. And it has seen us through numerous challenges. Okay. Challenges of decolonization, and more recently, the challenge of COVID-19. Mm-hmm. Instead of trying to confront COVID-19 as nation states, we came together by creating the African medicine platform for medicine, for procurement of medicine, which was a reflection of cohesiveness and multilateralism. And then we moved on to say, let us deepen the process of economic integration. We created the African Continental Free Trade Area. If you look around the world, it's the only organization of a continental scope. If you look at Europe, you've got the European Union, but not all European countries are members of the European Union.
And we know about even Brexit.
Yes, that's the thing. But if you look at the African Union, all of us, 55 member states, are part of that. Right. That's an achievement. Yes. Yes, okay. That's an achievement. And we are not stopping there. In 1991, we came up with the treaty establishing the African Economic Community, where there was a pronounced commitment, legal commitment, to create deeper economic integration by establishing the African Economic Community. The free trade area is one of them. The other one is to facilitate the establishment of the African Central Bank. To achieve that, you needed to have macroeconomic convergence criteria who facilitate eventually the achievement of a single occurrence. So in 2021, the heads of state and government were able to agree on the macroeconomic convergence criteria. And through that, we are going to create the African Monetary Institute, which will be based in Abuja, Nigeria. The task now is to ensure that member states start reporting on what they are doing to move us towards the macroeconomic convergence criteria. And ultimately, when we are sure that we've reached a certain level of harmonization, then we'll say the African Monetary Institute now is ready to transform into the African Central Bank, and then we issue a common African currency. That is one. The second one is trying to bring the Africans closer to the African Union. So in 2018, the heads of state and government adopted the protocol on free movement of people, right of residence, and right of establishment. Ratification has not been very, very fast. We need a minimum of 15 ratifications for it to enter into force. Right now, I've got about 32 countries that have signed, and only 4 have ratified. Now, when you look at that, you should also look at it in the context of the socioeconomic situation of Africa. Countries are going to be encouraged to ratify the treaty when we facilitate rapid economic growth across Africa. Then there's going to be demand for labor. So right now, if there is a lot of unemployment, it's very, very difficult for countries to really say, yes, we welcome fellow Africans to join us, because it creates social tensions within national borders. So the agenda to that is rapid economic growth, and we're working on that one. We've teamed up with our colleagues, AUDA-NEPAD and the African Development Bank, to come up with a study on key actions to achieve inclusive growth and sustainable development in Africa in the next 30 years or more. It's focusing on 2 key issues. One, to position African countries grow at rates of 7 to 10% per annum. It's very huge ambition, but it's achievable. With zeal, with will, it can be done. Then 2, to increase investments from the current level of 20% of Africa's GDP to 40%. That way, we'll be able to have higher rates of economic growth and we'll be able to facilitate greater demand for labor. And that protocol, it will be much easier to have it enter into force.
Your Excellency, you've enumerated a number of things that are very encouraging.
Yes.
But if you look at all the changes that are taking place at the global level, we mentioned COVID, we know so many of them in the last 10 years. The question is, are you very hopeful that Africa, with all the things that we are talking about here, we can achieve them within the lifespan, the 30 years that we are talking about here? Now, and here I'm asking with specific reference, for example, to the socioeconomic development, as we mentioned, because free movement of people, free movement of goods and services and all of that, only 4 countries have ratified. Now, the question is, what must African countries do? Or let me put it this way, what is AU doing in support of African countries to grow faster so that we can achieve the targets that we have set for ourselves with regard to the free movement of people and goods within the continental free trade area?
Now, when you look at Africa's demographic landscape,
right,
social, political, and economic landscape, we have a number of key assets that we have. The first one is population. The official figure of Africa's population around is 1.4 billion people. And that population accounts for 18% of the global population. Experts and policymakers tell us that 2050, Africa's share of the global population is going to rise to 25%. And come the year 2100, in the 22nd century, is going to be 38% of the global population. So the trajectory is very, very clear. Africa's population is going to increase well into the 22nd century. And the experts also tell you that population is destiny. When you have got the population, you have sources of labor. You have sources of consumption. You have sources of innovation, among others. So that is a key asset. So the task now is to promote human capital development and utilization and retention across Africa. That's the next step to add value to that key asset. The next asset is natural resources. We are a continent that is massively endowed with natural resources, such that the Economist magazine, they characterize Africa as rich, the richest region in the world in terms of natural resources, but the poorest in economic development. So against this background, I'm one of those who are very, very optimistic that Africa really is positioned to be more prosperous in the coming decades.
How?
How?
Yes.
This is the.
I mean, Your Excellency. I mean,
yes, the how. That's the thing.
Because you see,
yes, the how.
Yes.
I already answered it earlier.
Okay.
We've teamed up with AUDA-NEPAD. We've teamed up with the African Development Bank to come up with a study to achieve inclusive growth and sustainable development. What are the key actions that we needed to undertake to achieve economic growth and sustainable development across Africa, anchored on raising levels of economic growth from 7 to 10%, and also increasing investments from 20% of GDP to 40% of GDP. Now, the 7% is found in economic theory and investment theory. If an economy grows at 7%, its GDP doubles every 7 years. We are a young population. Our population, the growth rate is 3.5%. So for us to overcome poverty, we need this high rate of economic growth.
Right.
So that's the how.
But Your Excellency,
and investment, that's on the economic side. We also need to increase investments on research and development.
Right.
Human capital development, our education systems must be restructured to ensure that we are able to come up with the students who are employable. When they came out of college, they are immediately employable. We should create conditions where those students, when they come out of college, immediately they get employment. And also others who may want to be future employers, we should create conditions for them to come up with the startups. And as a result of that, we have partnered with the social enterprise, the Africa E-Trade Group, to come up with the African Union Youth Startup Program, so that those young people who are innovators, who wanted to solve problems of society, can come up with enterprises which they can use to really contribute to the prosperity of Africa.
Your Excellency, I wish I can be, all of us can be as optimistic as you are. But let's make it very practical. Mm-hmm. Let's take, for example, the Africa Agenda 2063. Yes. A decade has passed. Yes. I'm not sure whether a study has been done to evaluate the performance so far. Mm-hmm. I mean, I haven't read anything yet. But you are talking of a continent where unemployment keeps rising. Okay? Now, if you look at West Africa, for example, all the agitations that are going on and all of that, the question is, how are we going to ensure that we can utilize the resources that we have on our continent to achieve the objectives that we have enumerated, particularly from where you sit as AU? Mm-hmm. What is AU doing in support of country members in particular? Mm-hmm. The same natural resources that we have. Mm-hmm. I mean, you talk to everybody, most people, and they'll tell you that it's all the same old story. Mm-hmm. So what practically can the youth of Africa be so convinced that what you and I are discussing today, the story will be different 20 years from now?
Well, the first step we have taken as African Union is to create an office of youth envoy in the office of the chairperson of the African Union. And that youth envoy has the role to mobilize all the youth across Africa, to involve them in the socioeconomic development of Africa. And over and above that, we've got a division to promote youth empowerment. Mm-hmm. So this is how we are trying to involve the youth. But before I go into greater detail, we have finished the first 10 years of the African Union Agenda 2063. And on the basis of that, an evaluation was done. And we shall be meeting from the 1st of October to the 3rd of October in Kigali, Rwanda, with ministers of foreign affairs, ministers responsible for economic development, and ministers responsible for finance, to come up with the second year implementation plan of the African Union.
Following the evaluation that has been done.
Yes, following the evaluation. Right. The second year implementation of a plan of the African Union Agenda 2063. And from our point of view, as we go into the second year, one of the key factors...
The second decade.
The second decade is the need to focus on domestic resource mobilization. Because if you look now at the official development assistance flows across the world, they've been declining in real terms. Yeah. So we need now to ensure that we focus on domestic resource mobilization. And there are already low-hanging fruits. Just give a few examples. One of them is illicit financial flows, somewhere which is around 89 to 90 billion US dollars going out of Africa every year. If we can curtail that, that's the domestic resources. The other one are the incentives that we give to foreign investors. Our colleagues at the African Tax Administration Forum and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa recently came up with a study on the annual cost of these incentives, and they came up with a figure of 220 billion US dollars. The other low-hanging fruit are the carbon credits. If we negotiate, and we'll come back to the issue of Nairobi, if we negotiate very, very well there, Africa can be getting annually about $82 billion in carbon credits. Right. All those are resources that can be devoted towards socioeconomic development. Then over and above that, are the private sector entities. Right. Africa has about 46 billionaires right now we are talking. And out of those 46 billionaires, 23 billionaires are living outside Africa because they feel that the conditions are not appropriate. So the task now is, as African Union, to talk to the multimillionaires, the billionaires, to say, what do you need us to do as Africa to create the conditions for you to come back and invest in your continent? Right. If we convince them that that's an additional source of domestic resource, then throughout the national territories, you find that tax administrations have problems of even having citizens paying their full share of the taxes. So that one also needs to be looked at. We needed to strengthen the national tax administrations to be able to collect taxes from each citizen. Right. All of us have an obligation. Absolutely. And we enjoy public services. So we must pay taxes or full share. Right. So domestic resource mobilization is key to that. Right. And once we do that, then we'll be very well positioned to implement our programs. The other key asset that we have is the African continental free trade area. It offers a market of 1.4 billion people. Absolutely. There are very few countries around the world which have that in number. You talk of China, you talk of India. So as a continent, we have an aggregate population of 1.4 billion people. That's an internal market which can accelerate the process of economic development. And we are going to invest in ensuring that the African continental free trade area is transformed into a customs union and an internal market so that it can really create conditions for enhanced domestic consumption.
We'll come to the African continental free trade area, which I know you are an expert there, because by your bio, it seems from the beginning you have been there, and so you see everything. But Your Excellency, let me take you back a little bit. You've mentioned very interesting, issues. The issue of investment, yes, taxes, youth unemployment. Yes. Now, in your earlier statement, you indicated that one of the things you are doing is to ensure that students who are coming out of our universities, yes, will be employable. Yes. But Your Excellency, I don't know if you are aware of the statistics now, in Africa now, the unemployment rate, particularly for graduates of universities, are on the rise. Yes. Now, so my question is, everything we are talking about seems to be we will do, we will do, we will do. What practical steps is the African Union Commission taking in support of individual member states to address this issue of youth unemployment of our graduates? We are not even tacked the majority of those who can't even climb to the tertiary level, the GVET, the vocational institutions and all of that. It used to be only dropouts go to do vocational institutions and all of that. We have not addressed those matters now. So unemployment is on the rise. So all the hope that you are giving us, my question is, what practical steps? I mean, I would really love to talk to the person in charge of the youth development.
Yes, you do that. But,
yes, but what practical steps?
From our point of view.
Yes.
From our point of view, there are two key programs focused on youth empowerment and, to some extent, women empowerment. The first one is the African Youth Startup Program. Right. And we have teamed up with our colleagues in the African E-Trade Group, right, to ensure that we create conditions which are appropriate for the emergence of startups across Africa. Right. The first step is legislation. Very few of our member states have legislation for youth startups. Not too long ago, we had a meeting down here where we said we needed to really enhance awareness so that as many of our member states as possible are able to come up with the legislation, which is going to really provide a number of issues. But the first one is to say what incentives are there. And I've recommended, it's yet to go to the ministers, I've recommended that when it goes to the ministers, each African country should commit that 1.5% of its GDP would be devoted to youth startups. Why do I say so? Yes. Why I say so is that quite a number of our young people have got good ideas. Now, when it comes to issue of access to finance, that's where the roadblock comes.
Absolutely. And
some of the rates are as high as 25% or more.
Absolutely.
But if you do a comparative analysis across the world, you find that what has driven youth startups or startups in general is access to zero interest financing. Yes. Zero interest financing. Absolutely. And when the governments undertake zero interest financing, they are aware that others will succeed, right. Others may not succeed.
It's always like that.
But those who succeed,
they are
able now to go to the next phase, absolutely, which is initial public offering.
Yes.
Where they put their enterprises on the stock market and they merge as big companies. Right. We are working on that one, trying to come up with the mainstreamed youth startup legislation across Africa, which will be harmonized so that it will be not be competing in offering incentives to would-be investors. Then the other one is the small and medium enterprise strategy, where we recognize that the starting point is to promote the emergence of micro, small, and medium enterprises. Now, when you look again around the world, the largest source of employment are the micro, small, and medium enterprises. So if you want to address the issue of youth unemployment, first startups, then micro, small, and medium enterprise, invest in those. There are a number of issues that need to be handled, one of which is capacity building. A lot of our entrepreneurs need lots of training, technical skills and other operational skills, including mindset, including simple things like bookkeeping. I know of small entrepreneurs, they don't know how to maintain books of account. Now, when they go to the bank to say, I need to expand my business, the question they asked is, let's look at your books account. I said, what is that? Yeah, so all that needs to be factored into. Once we have achieved that, then we should be able to really create a new environment. Now, when it comes to access to finance, again, we've teamed up with the social enterprise, again, the Africa E-Trade, to come up with the Strategic Investment Alliance, where we can facilitate very low investments to be supported by financial institutions with minimum risk. So those are the measures that we're undertaking to address the issue of youth unemployment at our level. Yes.
I mean, Your Excellency, it seems you are doing a lot. And by the way, to give you comfort, we've already spoken to Mr. Mudwalem. We went to Kigali.
Yes.
We saw their facility.
Yes,
and
that's good.
It was a fantastic interview.
That's good.
And I would, as I mentioned, I would come and interview the youth sector as well. Yes. But Your Excellency, the issue of working with our government to legislate, to come up with legislation towards youth empowerment, to reduce unemployment. How optimistic are you? And I'll give you a practical example. Take for example, this issue about collecting taxes from imports for the area of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. How are we doing as a continent? How are countries committed to even that? I think it's 0.5 or 1% that they're supposed to be charging from imports to finance trade, issues with...
No, that is zero is for peace and security. It's not yet trade.
No, yeah, but my point is, how are these nations committed in, paying these commitments that we are talking about here? AU, if you take AU Commission, I don't know what percentage of AU budget is financed from local resources as opposed to partners. So this legislation that you are talking about is good on paper, but practically, are we sure that is going to be done in order for us to address the youth unemployment problem, which is becoming a security threat on our continent now?
Well, the issue here is, let's look at the broader picture. Right. the broader picture is that if we can move the African Continental Free Trade Area.
We'll come to that.
Yes, as soon as possible.
Right.
To an African customs union. When we reach that stage, we are going to have a common external tariff. And when we have a common external tariff, it means that there is going to be a pooling of resources. And it also means that some of the countries which are not well-to-do will be getting net receipts from those pooled resources. Right. But that is not something which is going to happen today. It will take some time. But to prepare member states, our department, in partnership with the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, and with financing from the European Union, we have come up with a study which will be ready next year on the readiness assessment towards an African customs union / common market. It's at that stage that we'll be able to get those resources. The percentage that we're talking of is just as a test case, more or less a beginning to see how we can do it, and it's focused on peace and security.
Let's come back to the Africa Continental Free. And I, like I said, from your bio, it's obvious that this is your baby.
Yes.
Which is good. So I'd like to know your view on this. How optimistic are you about the success of Africa? But before that, could you just give us a summary of the key indicators, the key pillars of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area? For Your Excellency, it will surprise you that majority of Africans, even if you go to the universities, majority, for almost about 30 years, I've worked in the youth industry. And I'll tell you that many young people don't even know about the key indicators of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. So, Your Excellency, could you please give us a summary of what these Africa Continental Free Trade Area key indicators are?
Okay.
Please.
No, thank you very much. I think the starting point is that we are living in a world of massive information.
Absolutely.
Huge amounts of information are uploaded in the social media. Now, as a result of that massive information, you find that a lot of people do not visit the websites where they can get technical information.
The key websites.
There's the key websites. So there's knowledge and there's just ignorance.
Right. Right.
Now, when it comes to the African Continental Free Trade Area, the starting point is that we are creating a large market space of 1.4 billion people. And right now, 90% of those goods, the goods traded in the African Continental Free Trade Area are supposed to be traded duty-free.
Duty-free.
So
90% of them?
90%. So all it requires now is for a trader from any country to say, how do I access this market? You go to the ministry responsible for trade and industry. They'll be able to give you all the technical details. Then you say, when I have access to this market, how do I ensure that I've got distribution centers across Africa? And what other partners do I need for me to reach that market? So the issue of partnering comes into being. So people should not think that I should do it alone. No, it's a large market. You need really to partner. You need to cluster your output, put it together so that you reach that market. Now, that also demands trust. In quite a number of cases, I've come across some of the cases. An entrepreneur from country X teams up with an entrepreneur from country Y. And they go into partnership. And the entrepreneur from country X supplies those goods.
And the money is not...
The person disappears.
Right.
Those stories are faces, a lot of those stories disappears. So it comes back to issue of mindset to say we need to really ensure that there is business integrity throughout the system. And hence, our partnering with the African Business Council to establish the African business, our partnering with the private sector to establish the African Business Council so that they will be able to talk to their member states. And they will be able to also assist us in coming up with a director of authorized economic operators so that these issues of theft are no longer there, so that they can only deal with the people who have integrity and are really interested in mutual benefit in developing a business.
If you have just joined in, this is the Religion and Enterprise Television, where we are discussing issues to do with faith-based institutions and the role they can play in facilitating trade and SMEs development on the continent. And today we happen to be in the home of Africa, the African Union Commission, talking to the Commissioner in charge of Economic Development, Trade, Industry, Minerals and Tourism, His Excellency Albert Muchanga, who is in charge of this department. Your Excellency, you just talked about the issue of trust.
Yes.
And the issue of partnering with each other
yes.
across country. Now, you discover that almost about 60 to 70% of SMEs
yes.
in Africa
yes.
are in the informal sector.
Yes.
Largely, led by women and young people.
Yes.
So, what do you consider, or what are the key programs that the Union, the African Union Commission, is doing in support of member states to ensure that SMEs in the informal sector are capacitated to be able to play active role in the Africa Continental Free Trade Area program?
The first step we took was to encourage the micro, small and medium enterprises to come up with the All Africa Association. So there's an association of African micro, small and medium enterprises who are able to liaise with us, and we address those issues. Then out of that, we also developed a strategy, African Union strategy on the small and medium enterprises. And based on that, we created an annual forum of micro, small and medium enterprises, so that each year we bring them from across Africa. They tell us their stories. What have they done in the past year?
So when you say we bring them, who? Who are the people you bring?
The entrepreneurs.
Who? Is it the people who can afford it, or the large number of the young and women?
Well, some of them we sponsor them.
Okay.
Some of them.
But how much can you sponsor? How many can you sponsor?
Well, that's why issue.
Because Excellency, the challenge is, the real problem on the ground is that largely many of African business people, who we call entrepreneurs, many who are women and young people, can't even, take for example, and this is an issue, earlier on you mentioned the incentives we give to foreign business. Is it possible, for example, within the same broad framework of the Africa Continental Free Trade, for AU to work with member states to say, look, let's have a program whereby our indigenous SMEs, we can give them tax break as part of the growing mechanism, maybe for a year or two. So when they start businesses, let's create institutions that will build their capacities, but within that period, let's give them some tax breaks, just like we do for foreign companies, so that we can help them to grow their capacities and then be able to say, look, we're coming to AU for the conference to hear more about this. Is it possible?
You don't know, the starting point is now back to issue of the capacity. Right. For the governments, for the tax administrators to say, let's give incentives, they should be aware that they are going to be fully utilized. And like I indicated, quite a majority of our people do not even have books of account. So the issue of capacity building is very, very key. And that brings into mind one of the measures we took. Last year, we had the Niamey conference on industrialization and the economic discussion across Africa. And there, we mobilized the Pan-African financial institutions. And they agreed to come up with the grant of $2 million to provide capacities to train micro, small, and medium enterprises so that they're capacitated to be able to afford to borrow from financial institutions in their national capitals. Yes. So when that has been achieved, that's when now comes the issue of tax incentive to say, for us to make profits, we need a tax break for so many years, and this is what we are negotiating. When that comes, we'll be able to work with the member states. Because you see, when we bring this, when we bring participants to the forum I talked about, it's not just the micro, small, and medium enterprises. we also bring in directors who are responsible for micro, small, and medium enterprises. And he also indicated when we met about 3 weeks ago that in the future, there are 2 key people we need to bring. The people involved with the ministries of finance.
Okay.
So this issue of access to finance is dealt with.
Very key.
The issues involved with the tax administration.
Absolutely.
These issues of high tax rates comes into being.
Absolutely.
Let us bring them into this forum so that they are able to hear directly. Yes. From the market players.
Good.
That's how we're working.
Wonderful. This is good. So Your Excellency, let me just to move away from the, but what, from where you sit and having observed the launch of the Continental Free Trade since 2021, and now trading have started. Unfortunately, only a few countries have actually, is participating. What do you consider to be the main challenges for the smooth implementation of this Continental Free Trade? It's a fantastic idea.
Yes.
But what are the key challenges from where you sit?
The first challenge is production. Well before we rolled out the African Continental Free Trade Area, I made a lot of statements calling on investors to invest in expanding their production so that they are able to satisfy the market. They did not respond. So a lot of them lack capacity. Because the feedback I'm getting is that even some of those companies that are able to take the goods, within a short time, they are out of the shelves. And it takes them time before they are back. Yes. So for one to take advantage of this large market, you need to expand production. And if you're not expanding production, you need to team up with other producers, and that is called clustering. You agree on the common standards to say this is the minimum quality. If you observe that quality, we put our products together. So that they are sold. It can be from any part of Africa to another, back to the issue of trust. So that we are able to reach out that market. That's the first thing. The next thing is that you need warehouses across Africa. It is not good that you are able to supply for 1 month. Then the commodity goes out. And it takes you 6 months again before you are supplying. But if you've got a warehouse, you are able to see the movement of your products. And every day you are stocking. Every day you are stocking. So the warehouses and other distribution centers need to be planned. Then, in some cases, we have moved very slowly on the harmonization of regulations, especially when it comes to pharmaceutical and standardization. When it comes to pharmaceutical products. There are some investors who have already established in one African country, and they wanted to reach out to the whole of Africa. But they found out that they cannot move their products because of different regulations. So we are working to resolve the issues. The question of standardization, we are addressing it. Right now, in the morning, I met a team to brief me on where we are on the issue of the Made in Africa standard. They assure me that either end of this year or early next year, we should be able to roll out the Made in Africa standard. Now, each country, and that is a standard is being developed in collaboration with the national standards officers. So that it's fully harmonized of the member states.
Wonderful.
So that when we roll it out, they are all convinced that this is what they agreed to. Now, if a company now qualifies to put the label Made in Africa, it would have met all the technical standards that are required. So there will be no technical barriers to trade. So these are some of the issues that we are still facing to develop this market. But over time, we should be able to resolve them, because I think as the world changes now, what is very, very clear is that the domestic market is very, very, very important. And for Africa, the domestic market is the African Continental Free Trade Area.
Now, this is exciting. I'm very excited about the fact that progress is being made. But, Your Excellency, you agree with me that in spite of all these things that we are talking about, if the free movement of people is not rectified to enable Africans to move freely to do business within the continent, it's going to be a challenge. That calls in the issue of the AU passport.
Yes.
How optimistic are you about us? Let me put it this way. Would we see the African Union passport, say, in the next 10 years?
Yes, let me give you some. As we are working on this, and I indicated where we are on the issue of the free movement of the protocol on free movement. As we are working on the protocol on free movement of people, we've also taken some steps at the African Union to ensure that business people who have main business endeavors across Africa are given the African Union laissez-passer.
Laissez-passer. Before the passport comes in.
All the staff of the African Union Commission, and including other policy institutions related to the African Union, they've got the African Union laissez-passer. I should have come with one. Yeah, I left it.
But
now, the element is very important. When you have that laissez-passer, you get visa on arrival. Now, the business people who are really very active, they've come to us and we've provided them with that laissez-passer. So they'll be able to apply. Now, ultimately, when we have got a stage where a lot of countries have ratified the protocol, then what it will mean is that within the national passport, they will be marking this is also the African Union passport, such that the African citizen will be able to use that more or less like a card. When they go to another African country, they just show that and they'll be able to be allowed. It will take some time, confidence building, mindset change, and economic development. All these factors need to come into.
So, I mean, I like the fact that some steps have been taken, and of course, the issue of laissez-passer is an innovation, and a good step in the right direction. Are there some criteria that each member state has to comply with in terms of the entrepreneurs? So, for example, if I'm an entrepreneur, say in Ghana or Kenya,
if you are involved in more than 14 African countries, come and see us.
Oh, so you have to have a business,
yes, of course,
which operates in more than 14 African countries before you can have the laissez-passer. Wow. So that means that those in the informal sector certainly cannot apply.
No, because the problem with the informal sector, yes, is that when
majority of whom are women.
Yeah, and women
who feed us.
Yes, the problem with the informal sector, and I've just finished a meeting not too long ago with the Economic Commission for Africa. The problem with the informal sector is that, well and good, they are able to feed their
family,
their children,
and pay their school fees.
But at the end of the day, we do not know the statistics of cross-border trade. There was a study undertaken by the Brooks Institution, which showed that if we are able to factor in cross-border trade, informal cross-border trade across Africa, actually, we would find that the rate of trade has increased by 15 to 18%. So we have taken a study on informal cross-border trade to see how we can mainstream them into the African trade statistics. And also, we can provide capacity building for them so that they are able to know the benefits of formalization. And also paying taxes if they need to pay taxes. That way they'll be able to grow their businesses.
Let's talk about technology. In all that we are talking about, whether we are formalizing the SMEs or even enhancing trade and capacity and all of that, technology comes in here. What is AU doing to build the capacities of member states as far as ICT is concerned?
Way back in 2013, we adopted the science, technology, and innovation strategy for Africa, which runs from 2013 to 2024. It's coming to an end next year. Now, one of the key provisions there is that during this decade, this period, each African country should commit 1% of its GDP to research and development. But that has not been achieved. The figure we have is just somewhere between 0.42 to 0.5%. But we have told member states that this is not good at all, because if we do not invest in research and development, we are undermining our future. And we have given them examples of some countries which have committed as much as 4.8% of their GDP to research and development. Others, 9%. The result is many. So just I'm making a call right now that each African country should commit 1.5% of its GDP to startup development. I say, in addition to that, each African country should commit 1.5% of its GDP to research and development. We needed to transform our universities into research universities. They are sources of innovation. So that, and the professors now should be able to really be given opportunities to undertake industrial research. We needed to ensure that our enterprises are able to make use of that research. And they should also be able to look around the world to say, I think there's an opportunity for me to buy this business outside the world so that I have access to technology. That is allowed. A lot of companies, I'm not going to name them, but a lot of companies have done that. Some started as small enterprises in 1989. Today, they are multinational companies because they are able to see around the world to say, this is an opportunity for me to buy that SME and have access to technology. That requires investing in research and development. So a lot of our governments, a lot of our entrepreneurs have really not yet seen the value of putting money in research and development.
Just a few days ago, AU became a member of the G20.
Yes.
What does Africa stand to benefit from being a member of the G20?
Well, the first recognition is that we are a population of 1.4 billion people. Right. So there is inclusivity. Absolutely. The G20 has really promoted the spirit of inclusivity. Right. And then when they've invited the African Union, it's also a major investment. Because when it was only South Africa, 96% of the African population was outside the G20. Now, 100% of the African population is in the G20. As following this, work is underway, which I'm not in a position to bring out now, to come up with a policy and institutional framework on how to engage in the G20. Then also to come up with an agenda on what we are taking to the G20. We know our assets, we know our needs, we are going to project them.
So you just have to harmonize them.
And speak with one of us as Africa.
So the story will be different now.
The story is different. Africa has been given a voice in the global governance, and we are going to make use of that voice.
Absolutely. This is good. Your Excellency, we live in a continent where almost 19 to 99% of the people are religious. They either go to church or they're in the mosque. Yes. But it so happens that faith-based institutions have not become an integral part of the continental discourse. Are you concerned about this?
Well, they should be, because you see, I'm a Catholic. Now, in the Catholic faith, we believe that we should complement our faith with action to better human society. So when you go to the parish where I came from, it has been involved in youth training so that the youth are given industrial skills. It has been involved in giving scholarships from the lower grade to university. Right. For those students coming from families which cannot afford it to take them into college. So those are actions that should be really facilitated. So would have no harm if faith-based institutions said they wanted to engage with the African Union. They would no harm. The African business, the African private sector, they approached us to say, we want to have a platform where we can engage with the African Union. And out of that came the African Business Council. So it's up to you. Organize yourselves. We shall listen to you, and we should be able to accommodate.
Now, it has been said that what lasts most is not the buildings we leave and the money we leave in the bank accounts, but the legacies we leave for generations unborn. In your closing remarks, Your Excellency, we've talked about Africa Continental Free Trade Area. We've talked about youth. We've talked about women. We've talked about all the things that are the possibilities of Africa. How, as you in your concluding remark, what would you like to tell the 1.2 billion people, particularly the youth and the women and the SMEs, in your concluding remarks, as your legacy, being the Commissioner for Economic Development?
What I can say to the people of Africa is that to succeed in life, believe in yourself. Each one of us has the power to transform our lives. If you do not believe in yourself, nothing can happen. If you believe in yourself, it's a miracle. What seems impossible becomes possible. And engage. Acting alone does not yield results. Community yields results. So create a community of like-minded people so that together you move forward. And as Africa, that's what we did way back 1963. We created the Organization of African Unity. We transformed it into the African Union. And out of that, we are creating additional institutions like the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is going ultimately to become the African Customs Union / Common Market, and eventually African Economic Community. So community empowers. Working alone does not. So believe in yourself. The future is bright. Nothing is impossible in life. Thank you.
So behave yourself. The future is bright, and let's work together. This has been the Religion and Enterprise Africa Television, and today we've been in the house of the African Union Commission and right in the office of the Commissioner in charge of Economic Development, Trade, Industry, Minerals and Tourism, His Excellency Albert Muchanga. Your Excellency, it's been a great honor speaking with you.
Africa needs you.